feedback on the experiences we've had over the last year of trying to deal with the mutual trust internationally and outside Europe. So this is based on a study we carried out a few years ago, and in that study we identified some areas of mutual trust, so it's all building blocks towards establishing mutual trust. And then I'll describe how that model is applied to two areas where we're establishing mutual recognition. First of all, with the providers of web browsers, and also between the European regulators and non-EU countries. So just to emphasize the importance of mutual recognition of trust across internationally, is that today's trading and global economy is very much interlinked, that there is no one country that controls trust. There are lots of individual, national and sector and company trust schemes, and somehow we need to interlink the different trust schemes to support the reality of cross-border trade and the global economy. So just to introduce the work we did in ETSI a couple of years ago, where we did an investigation of all the different trust schemes across the world. We went as far as Japan, across to the US, and we had some discussions with our colleagues in the Arab arena. And out of this international discussion, we identified two aspects that we need to identify. First of all, when establishing trusts, it needs to be narrowed down to a particular service type. So in Europe, we have lots of different trust services. First of all, to do with electronic signatures, but we have other types of trust services to do with electronic delivery, mutual trust of registered electronic delivery of emails, website authentication, and now with the new EIDAS regulation coming up in the next year or so, we've got a new form of trust service on electronic identity and attestation of attributes. And each of those needs to be identified in terms of a separate trust service where you need to address various areas of recognition. And so for each of these trust services, we look at 4 different areas in this study. First of all, the legal requirements that underpin the recognition of the electronic signature or other forms of identity, how that is supervised and overseen. There needs to be somebody who oversees the operation of trust services for a particular sector and for a particular set of trust services. Then underpinning that is the need for technical best practices for establishing the trust, so that everyone in a community establishes a common set of rules on technically how to address the requirements at the legal and supervisory level for meeting the requirements for trusted operation, and then finally how that is represented in some electronic means you can represent trust between areas. So looking at the types of legal frameworks within which trust can operate, we have, first of all, in Europe, we have the EIDAS regulation, which has some establishes regulation within Europe, and also a way of establishing a trust with third countries based on mutual equivalence to the EU qualified trust services. Then there is another framework being established under UNCITRAL. There's a working group concerned with electronic commerce and has established a model law for use of cross-border recognition of identity and trust services, and by establishing national regulations based on this model law, the legal framework can be more easily harmonized. And then in UK and some countries, a common law, rather than depending on specific legal provision, there's also common law establishes on best practices, and certainly in the UK and a number of other countries, rather than being based on a very specific legal framework, establish best practices which through legal decisions can be recognized as meeting a very high level legal requirement. Looking at the supervision, in Europe we have established a rule under Article 17 of EIDAS of the operation of a national supervisory body whose responsibilities is to ensure that trust service providers operate accordance to the rules of EIDAS within their domain. And this is based on two aspects: a 2-year audit report that the QTSP has to carry out against best practices, and that has to be carried out by a recognized ETSI or ISO accredited auditor. In addition, there is a scheme for reporting and security incidents, so that if a problem does occur with the security of a particular TSP, the national supervisory body immediately gets involved and oversees how that incident is dealt with, and also ensures that others across Europe are aware of security incidents, so that the same doesn't occur across the whole of Europe. And then there are a number of sector-based schemes. For example, we've worked with Safe Biofarm, which is now Direct Trust, and also in the aerospace defense arena, Certipath, where they have their own sector-based trust schemes, which are overseen by a overall authority from representatives in that sector. And so the supervision is based on a committee of members of that sector who oversee the operation of trust services in that arena. Again, that's commonly based on an audit report, and in some cases dealing with security incidents so that they can be dealt with across the sector. And then we have IT providers such as Adobe, who provide Acrobat, which supports electronic signatures. And then there's a range of platform providers that include support for web browsers. And for example, they often recognize either an ETSI ISO accredited auditor, or there's another scheme called Web Trust, which carries out the audit. And again, that audit is passed on to whoever is the authority within the IT provider's organization and decide whether that audit meets its requirements. Looking at technical best practice, ETSI have defined a set of best practices for issuing certificates by a certification authority, and I include the reference there. And these have been recognized across Europe by most countries as being best practices for meeting the EIDAS qualified level of requirements. Where there are sectors which have trust services, such as the biopharm industry and the aerospace industry, then these sectors generally specify their own specific standards which need to be met. These are commonly also based on internationally recognized standards. And for example, we have had cross checks between the Safe Biopharm and the ETSI standards and try and harmonize them as much as possible. And then we have the, for IT providers, Adobe have their own approved trust scheme, and then the CA and browsers have got together to produce baseline guidelines which are accepted by all the web browsers providers, Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, Amazon, and so on, as a basis for their trust schemes, which is again supervised by the IT provider. And then out of the whole consideration against meeting supervisory requirements and best practices, there is establishment of a representation of that is trusted. In Europe, we have an EU trusted list, which is in fact a list of lists, and the national supervisory body, if it passes its requirements, adds it to the trusted list. Then most of the sector-specific schemes that we've worked with, they're based around the a bridge CA, which is widely adopted also by the federal PKI, and this provides cross certificates. So again, if a national, the sector authority represented by the board of the, is recognizes that it meets its requirements based on best practice, produces a cross certificate from a bridge CA, and then the IT providers such as Google and Adobe, they produce their own lists of based on a root store of CAs which are trusted. So whilst these have different forms of representing, they all represent the same idea that there is a statement from a trusted authority which is represented in the list, or a cross certificate which indicates that a certain trust service provider or certification authority has met the requirements of its trust scheme. So just to look at a couple of examples of how this is being applied. First of all, we've been working with the browsers for a number of years, and most specifically on identifying formally how this operates, so that CAs or trust service providers issuing website certificates can, first of all, meet the requirements of the browser root program through a combined policy which combines the ETSI and the CA browser forum certificate policies in a new superset. So we have worked with the browsers and the CAB forum to define a superset which includes both the CAB forum and the ETSI standards requirements. And out of this certificate policies, we get 2 audit reports produced, one from an audit against the same issue of the certificate, same certification authority. One audit report goes to the browsers and the browser provider, the Google, Microsoft, or whoever, decides whether it meets its requirements, and if approved, is added to its root store. Or similarly, there's an audit report passed to the national supervisory body, which, based on the audit report, decides whether it meets its requirements under EIDAS, and if it meets their requirements, it added to the EU trusted list. So we have, in fact, a dual parallel scheme, and a TSP can be recognized both under the browsers scheme and the EIDAS scheme. Just the other system that's been established in Europe based around this 4-pillar methodology, which I described earlier, is based on each of the 4 areas I described: trust, representation, supervision, legal context, and best practice. We ensure that there is direct equivalence, and then each party, in its own way of representing trust, can add it to their own trust scheme, either on a general basis by cross-representing on the trust list, or lower down on accepting the decisions of supervisory bodies. But in the case of the EU scheme, then this is done by cross-referencing one trusted list by another. So just to highlight, the building blocks are based around these 4 areas: legal requirements, supervision, technical best practice, and trust representation for each of the service types. And we are working towards achieving a global trust scheme, and this operates at the 2 types of operation. One is mutual recognition of the 2 trust schemes, and the other is cross-recognition at the highest level by the trust lists. So if you want further information, there's a large number of standards available. And if you go to these web pages, you can first of all just identify all the standards on that are applicable to signatures and trust services. These can be downloaded by searching for a particular number or title through a standard search. If you want to keep up to date with latest activities, we have a news list which you can register on this address. And also there's information on the EU pilot, which I described just in the last slide, for international cross-recognition of a trusted list. And if you go to that link, you can find further documentation. Finally, if you've got any further questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. Nick, for this excellent presentation. Let's see if there are any questions from the audience. No questions. Okay, I have a question, by the way. It's regarding a pilot. As far as I know, there is a pilot that began being implemented in Europe concerning the mutual trust between European countries and third countries. That began in 2021, as far as I know. Are there any results that you can already share with us regarding this pilot?
As far as latest information, if you go to the website I show for the EU pilot, there is various documentation. I don't have direct contact with someone. I know other people involved. So if you've got particular questions, this has been successfully operated with colleagues in Japan, and also we've had some work with other countries near to Europe. But if you have any specific inquiries, I can pass it on to some colleagues to try and get further details. But there's quite a lot of information on that website if you go to that site.
Okay, thank you so much. So we thank again our speaker for this excellent intervention. And now we move to the second presentation. Mr. Vijay Kumar Manjunatha. He is the head of technology of eMudra and the Secretary General of Asia PKI Consortium. Mr. Vijay, the floor is yours.
So I have my presentation. Can I also get the slide changer, please? Thank you. Okay. Once again, good afternoon, all of you. Firstly, thanks to AICTO, AICTO for organizing this event and inviting us to participate in this. So I represent from Asia PK Consortium. I will give a very brief introduction about Asia PK Consortium, what we are doing. Basically, we help the countries, the member countries as well as the cooperation countries to adopt PKI and move towards mutual recognition. So that's the broader objective. I'll go through details. Before that, let me quickly introduce myself. I am CTO at eMudra. eMudra, we have been a PK solution enabler in several geographies across the world. I also chair several bodies. I am chairing the panel on digital signature at Bureau of Indian Standards. I chair Technology and Standards Working Group at Asia PKI. I am Secretary General of Asia PK Consortium as well. I am part of UNC FACT in enabling digital cross-border trade. I actively participate with several global bodies and forums in this. One of the key area what we do is I am also involved in consulting to several geographies in adopting PKI and enabling use cases, which has been a challenge for several countries. So recently we came up with Kenya as a trust service provider. We have started operations there. We have helped set up the root CA. We power in African region, some of the countries like Egypt, we have enabled a couple of certifying authorities. We are now working with certain West African countries to enable PKI, and we'll be glad to liaise with the countries on that. Coming back to the consortium, so we are now a 2-decade-old consortium. We are headquartered in Hong Kong, that's our registered office. The aim is to secure electronic transactions, mainly in Asian countries, so our members belong to Asian countries. We work on popularizing PK as a technology towards securing the electronic transactions. We have very strong representations. We have members from about 11 plus countries in the Asian region. It has both government as well as private representations. As I said, the motto is towards adopting and building awareness on PKI and moving towards mutual recognition, which I'll cover much in detail. This is more a geographical representation of the coverage what we have. We have members from about 11 countries. We have several blue flags where the discussions are in progress. Certain discussions are in very mature stage of memberships. I think the flags are there, the members are there, but yeah, new members, we are expecting Vietnam to get onboarded, we are expecting Malaysia to be onboarded, we are discussing with several neighboring countries in Asia towards having the membership. These are some key member logos. I've been joined by one of our esteemed member from Saudi Arabia, from EMDA Trust Service Provider, Mr. Ibrahim is here. And also we are glad we have representation from DGA here. As erstwhile NCDC, they are now DGA, and they had participated in Asia PK Consortium as well. Very glad to have them here. But yeah, we have from East Asian countries like Korea, Taiwan, Japan as our members, as well as coming to the Middle East, we have from Iran, Saudi Arabia, and a very matured conversation with Oman, UAE, and Qatar. So very strong representations across the region. Very important thing is we have representation from both government as well as private participations, because industry participation is a very, very important thing if PK has to flourish in the geography. We have a few working groups, three major working groups. One is Business Application Working Group, chaired by Taiwan, Ms. Karen Chang. I co-chair that particular working group as well. Then we have Legal and Policy Working Group. This is chaired by Hong Kong and co-chaired by Iran. And we have Technology and Standards Working Group, which is chaired by myself. So very strong working groups. We continuously work on several objectives of working group, where on business applications, we try to work on use cases, enabling business applications to adopt public key infrastructure and build use cases. Legal and Policy Working Group is also very, very enthusiastic in supporting the countries in adopting the legal framework, which is a very key aspect. I'll come to that later in my presentation. But yeah, we work on enabling the countries in this aspect. Third is Technology and Standards, where we liaise with industrial bodies, we work on white papers, we conduct study tours, we bring back to the desk on the reports of these outcomes so that members can progress in this particular area. Next is the global cooperation. So this is very important for us. We intend to work with not only Asian region, our key area or the core membership region is Asia, but we work with several European countries. We have a MOU with HC as well on working on standardization platform and bringing it back to our members. We have signed an MOU with AICTO. That's a very important MOU for this region, where we see a lot of cooperation can happen between both the regions, the Asian region and the Arab African region. So I think a very key MOU has been signed between Asia PK and AICTO. Thanks for that. And also we are working on African region. We have an MOU with the African Alliance, more towards electronic transactions. But PK particularly, we are working with the East African region. We are working on evangelizing East African PK Forum. Kenya is taking a lead of it. So very soon, maybe next year, this would be a new PK Forum coming up in the region. So we work with, even in Latin America, we work with a couple of Western countries over there. And try to enable PKI in their regions. Key activities, we have been conducting several activities. We work on mutual recognition. We conducted a couple of workshops. We worked on WHO smart vaccination certification as well. We helped them giving the feedback and how to digitize and secure using PK as a use case. We work on IoT area. Now we have, next week we have a event on Web3 security and helping that with PK security coming into that. So a lot of activities happening. More importantly, what I will touch upon is some of the anticipated works what our working groups are doing. One of the important thing is, again, bilateral mutual recognition framework. India is presiding G20 for next year. So one of the sidelines agenda we are proposing is also introduce a framework for bilateral mutual recognition relationship, and this would be enabled via PKI as a trust parameter. So that's a very, very important activity, and our working group is very active on that. We also do a lot of studies, e-authentication framework, what's there in several regions. So we are working on Arab African region study. We are working on Asian countries. We already published a document way back in 2019, 2020, but we are working on upgrading this document with the latest use cases, what's happening in these countries. And so variety of use cases around PKI and how to bring more awareness and adoption of the technology. Coming to India, just one slide to give a big picture of what's happening in India. India hosts world's largest national ID, which is a paperless national ID, digital ID called Aadhaar. We have issued about 1.35 billion national IDs uniquely to citizens with a thorough physical verification of every individual. It provides online authentication and online KYC framework, very secure framework. You can use registered trusted devices to perform this authentication and utilize the infrastructure as a service provider. There is iris authentication, there is face authentication, there is fingerprint authentication. You can do OTP authentication for a low assurance use cases. So there are a variety of authentications what digital ID platform exposes. What we have built on this digital ID is enabling PKI for every citizen of the country. So today there are about 330 million citizens who have been participated in PKI in their day-to-day activities. Maybe it may be bank account opening, may it be contracts, may it be citizen services, social welfare schemes. Everywhere there is an e-signature adopted, and this is powered by national PKI and a cryptographic signature for that particular document. So this is a massive program what India has been leading, and a very large adoption of PKI use case around the world. It's used across the verticals, and it is backed by our Legal Information Technology Act. Applications, when we talk about more and more use cases are getting enabled, call the industry, it has PKI adopted, so more than 400 applications catering to 300 million plus users, e-governance, banking, tax filing, social welfare schemes, and a lot of corporate use cases, right? So employee onboarding, a very simple use case, and those contracts get into PKI and fully paperless. That's more about India, and the main subject, a couple of slides, I will talk about the mutual recognition program, what we are intending to do as part of Asia PK Consortium. Thanks to Mr. Nick, I think he already covered a very important aspect of legal framework, and there are 4 pillars what he already mentioned about. I will just touch back on that, and then put forward some of the understandings what we have. One of the basic necessity of moving towards mutual recognition is a legal framework of the country, because we are talking about inter-country mutual recognition, right? And these are several times regulation-driven, politically driven as well. So there is a need for a legislation to be there which can back the e-transaction, the digitally signed e-transaction. So that's a very fundamental thing. I'll present in next slide a UN report on this. But before that, once we have legislation, the next thing is the infrastructure readiness, right? Infrastructure readiness, when we talk about, it's both the regulator side. There are 2 ways to run PKI in the world. Like, so there is a national route policy, what several countries adopt, or there is a European methodology of recognizing the trust service providers, right? So there are 2 ways, but for both there should be a proper infrastructure and enablement of private participation. So this is very, very important aspect for moving towards mutual recognition. Role of public key infrastructure is very, very important because today if you see PKI is a very mature technology. It started with the unilateral model law way back in 1996 and 99. It was suggested most of the countries across the world have adopted mainly for cross-border trade, but that has been evolved as a very matured use case. Today if you talk about e-passports, right, the countries are moving to e-passports. ICAO policy again states public key infrastructure to be there as a shared public keys of every countries to be there so that immigration system can quickly validate such e-passports, right. So new use cases are again built on PKI and it is getting more and more strengthened. Then the use cases of PKI, I mean the mutual recognition, right? When we talk about mutual recognition, it's basically cross-border. So three important use cases what Asia PKI Consortium works on is one is recognition of digitally signed documents. So assume I sign a digital document in Tunisia. Can the neighboring country accept that or another country accept that? So this is called recognition of a digitally signed document. So when we get into bilateral agreements with those countries, then the important thing is they trust the root, that they trust the legislation of that country, and based on the public key infrastructure trust chain, such country cannot deny such particular digital document. Else today if you see a lot of procedures, there is a Hague policy where apostolization or consularization of a document is necessary for recognition outside the country, right? So digital signature, the public infrastructure mutual recognition can simplify this drastically. Second is for business digital contracts. Today digital contracts are getting into a lot of problem because the jurisdictions are neutral many cases, or it is one-sided. So if I enter an agreement between India and Tunisia, jurisdiction would be possibly India or Tunisia, but whereas the countries do not have a mutual recognition agreement by which that contract may not stand valid. The third use case is trade. Definitely unilateral model law evolves this, and today when we talk in UNC fact as well, the trade relies on public key infrastructure to trust digital documents. These are the three important use cases what we see as an outcome of mutual recognition. This is a picturesque representation of transaction legislation across the world. This is again coming from UN CTAD report way back in 2021 December. This was published. If you see, most of the countries have enacted the law. If you see, most of the countries, it has enacted the law. What is missing is infrastructure and readiness to operate public key infrastructure in those countries, right? So I think that's where the gap is. This map is fully, I think, almost green, where I think a neighboring country is red, but apart from that, I think mostly the globe is looking green. So we have legislation, but so this is the AICTO region broad coverage, again published by UN CTAD report. There are laws available in most of the countries. When we talk about even AICTO region, there are different laws, but I think mostly giving the legality to a digitally signed document. So this framework is already available in the region. So what is missing is the infrastructure readiness and moving towards mutual recognition. So to summarize, there are about 6 steps, right, what we necessarily follow or advocate in Asia PKI Consortium when it comes to mutual recognition. So first is legislation, when we talk about, which is mostly there in most of the countries. Second is infrastructure and service providers, enabling service providers and enabling the infrastructure. That's where, as even eMudra, we help the countries to enable the infrastructure. Third is building awareness, right, because third and fourth, awareness and adoption by application providers goes hand in hand, else it is a chicken and egg situation. The application provider says you build the users with digital signature, the user says there is no application where I can use digital signature. So that's why the building awareness and adoption by application providers is a very, very important aspect in the country to adopt PKI. And then important thing is interoperable framework. As previous speaker mentioned, it should be an interoperable framework so that it can be mutually recognized. So this is where HC framework, the web trust framework comes in, the compliance framework, so that a benchmarking is done of that country's PKI infrastructure. And once that benchmarking is done by this kind of global standards, either the North American standard of web trust or the European standard of HC, people can believe, the countries can believe such particular PK infrastructure and then move towards mutual recognition. And that's where the summary, we have to move towards mutual recognition and there are steps to follow. As Asia PK Consortium, we'll be very glad to support the countries wherever the help is required because we are already in a mutual cooperation agreement with AICTO and definitely happy to participate with AICTO regional countries and help them to move towards this particular goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay Kumar, for this excellent presentation. Any questions? Yes,
Thank you, Vijay. I just want to highlight something. Last week we had a meeting with the UN Central Committee in Riyadh, and they told us that they are about to issue a model law on digital identity, and I think it will be soon. So we will have a model law on digital identity from UN, and we will have EDAS. So I think it will be difficult to follow both model laws, and we think that Europe and maybe the UN, they need a discussion to have at least one model law at international level.
Thank you. So I think previous speaker touched upon that. So unilateral model law is an independent activity by the UN group. I think that's more enabler. But what HC have been doing, which I think Mr. Nick can more clarify, is more to make it compatible with the practices what HC has been doing. So finally, unilateral model law is a common model law. HC or even maybe Web Trust Framework would be compatible to this model law, and that's where the work is going on. HC is more a standardization. The model law is a advisory for the countries to adopt such model laws. And we are sure with more participation from industry and the governments, these would all be compatible. Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, so I would like to take the opportunity also and ask another question maybe. It's about another type of mutual recognition or another angle. It's about the technical angle, because the two first presentations were too focused on the legal aspect. But since in India you have opened Aadhaar as an open source platform, do you think from your experience that this can be a facilitator for interoperability that can be a driver for mutual recognition? Because if we only put the legal framework, it might not be followed up by concrete action. What do you think about this?
So there are 2 points over here. One is on the digital ID framework. Yes, India has open sourced the Aadhaar framework or the similar architecture. So there is MOSIP framework already. I think 3 or 4 African countries are implementing this now. Philippines has already implemented. Now Ethiopia, Morocco, several countries are implementing similar ID system. A lot of work is happening, and our e-signature framework is very much compatible. Very much compatible to this particular system, and we have been implementing similar structure. But when we talk about mutual recognition, technically there are multiple ways, right? So there is a cross certification, there is a cross recognition, there is a bridge CA model. So there are various models. It has to be again looked into a bilateral consensus, because at Asia PK we have been trying to work as a technical platform as well, but the consensus is tough when there is these are some things are politically driven, some things are government driven, relation driven. So there is no common answer for this. So it's again coming back to a bilateral agreement, whether they do a cross recognition or a cross certification, right? And then based on that technical infrastructure, it works. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Vijay Kumar, for this excellent feedback. So we move to the third presentation by Dr. Wissam Zoueri from Sama Partners Business Solutions. I think you have a presentation, right?
Yes. So, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to my presentation. I have the pleasure to be here with you today to emphasize the importance of cybersecurity for a reliable digital trust And of course, if we want to build a platform and blocks for recognition of digital trust, we have to think about these aspects, of course. So this is my agenda for today, but so I will start with very important sentence. So it takes 20 years to build reputation and few minutes of cyber incident to ruin it completely. It was said by Mr. Stefan Napo a few years ago, but it's very important to take into consideration and to know how elusive and fragile really so digital trust and trust itself is. Of course, here, when we speak about digital trust, we are speaking about so new prerequisites of good old values such as reliability, credibility, security applied, but in the digital space. And when we are speaking about security, we have, of course, confidentiality to take into account confidentiality, integrity, and also availability. These three pillars of the security building, so the CIA tried, but it's not the CIA what you have in mind now. It's so the information security model, of course, applied in the security domain. So when we have to speak about digital trust, we have to answer two very important questions. The first one is, it is possible to measure digital trust and to compare it across countries around the world. And the second one is, are there countries where guaranteeing trust is more urgent priority, where we have a gap so by these countries and we have to improve so digital trust. So for answering this question, we have four dimensions and key dimensions to be taken into consideration. Behavior and attitude. These two are associated with the givers, the people giving the trust itself, and we have the environment and the experience, which are the result of actions taken by the guarantors, who really giving the opportunity to share trust. So here is the study, or the results of studies done when we are comparing to 42 countries around the world, and here we have among them three Arab countries, and we see we have really the possibility, and we have the giving the possibility to reach more and to achieve more, and we can of course be inspired by our Saudi of course colleagues, and we can reach more. So there is more points. So here, when we want to build digital trust, we have three actions to be considered: verifying people, detecting data, and ensuring the system. But of course, all these three actions are related with some challenges. Here I want to highlight some challenges which are related to threats. And when we are speaking about threats, we know, every one of us know, that we have a fast-changing threat landscape these last years. And the threats exploit the increased complexity and connectivity in the trust-relevant systems. And so, for example, starting from the hosting, the infrastructure, for example, the platform as software and the services, but also the content is very important to know exactly that the content and the values has to be always, let's say, verified and to be trusted. So threats can undermine and erode trust completely. So, and that's why we know that digital trust is an elusive and fragile asset, as I said at the beginning. So here an example of some type of incidents which can affect platforms which can be used for recognition of trust. The most important thing I want to emphasize here is the service outage here, where we can affect the continuity and the availability of the system, but also the impact on other systems, for example, using ransomware, which we can impact not only the service, but the system itself. And of course, we have to think about threats and vulnerabilities which are existing in the system, but can come from outside and affect the system completely also. So here, a study which is very important to show the importance of the incidents, how can affect the system. And so when we see the, this one, sorry, it was too much. So here, the nature of the incidents, I don't know if I have the pointer here. So you see that they are, the most factors are human-related factors. The first one is the human errors can be made by the person itself, but also the malicious actors, about 20% that affect the system. And of course, the impact of these incidents is related directly and much more to the e-signature and the e-timestamp. That's why it's very important to know that these two aspects are or can be affected directly by incidents, and they should be really protected completely. So here, so the technical assets affected here, we have the most assets that are the generation and validation of signature and SEEDS platforms, and as a second in the ranking, we have clarification authorities, or certification authorities, platform with 33%. So, when we are, of course, speaking about threat intelligence and also the digital trust, we have the organization offering recognition and trust must protect their data and information from incidents and fraud and bad actors, threat actors, of course. And this protection safeguard not only the reputation and the trust, but also the relationship and the revenues at the end. And only high, secure, and connected and cognitive platform can deliver protected trust. That's why a global strategy for protection is vital for business continuity and availability. And in this case, the solution is we have to define the cyber resilience and to work on it. What is cyber resilience? Cyber resilience is a concept describing the ability to continue delivering the intended, sorry, okay, thank you. I think it's better so now. The ability to continue delivering intended outcomes despite, of course, the experiencing challenging, in the cyber events or the cyber attacks, but also very important to be, to protect everything against natural disasters and economic slumps. So effective cyber resilience must be a wide risk strategy and a collaborative approach driven from executive to everyone in the organization, partners, but also the supply chain participants and customers. Of course, when we are speaking about cyber resilience, we have also to speak about Cyber Resilience Act, and it's very important and needed to define this. But of course, this regulation, the Cyber Resilience Act, must be applied automatically and uniformly in all the Arab and African countries as soon as they are entering into force without needing to go into the national laws, but they are everywhere to be applied and taken into consideration. So here are some aspects of the Cyber Resilience Act, what we have to take into consideration. Some of them, or the most important them, are the objective of the Cyber Resilience Act, where we have horizontal cybersecurity standards to define horizontal cyber security standards for digital products and ancillary services, and the requirements that are important in the cybersecurity, and to have cybersecurity by design and by default. The whole life cycle is to be really transparent and protected. And what is very important also is to have the link between the Cybersecurity Act and the Cyber Resilience Act without having any contradictory compliance, for example. So, to enhance now the digital trust, we have some solutions which we can use in the digital world. For example, the artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence can be used for monitoring data, its access and use, and we have some aspects, of course, to take into consideration. If we have, for example, anomalies and we have missing data, artificial intelligence can help us to identify this and, of course, to find them directly in the real time. But of course, when we have algorithm and data, we have to think about infrastructure enabling us to detect and to make this directly solution working in real time, and that's why we need, of course, quantum technologies and quantum computing, which can help us really from the point of view of infrastructure and work it. And the solution which we can really use is the blockchain for data prevention and making the signature and everything immutable and, of course, verifiable. It's very important to take these aspects also for next. Of course, it's very important to make a strategy, and the most important thing is to improve this strategy and to make it in the future better and better with these technologies here listed. So here, for example, so blockchain-based security, and here emphasized are the aspects of the blockchain which we can take into consideration. But the most important thing is we have directly the immutability, but of course the decentralizing of the ledgers, which are everyone participating in this blockchain solution have a ledger and can verify, and everything is documented there. You don't have the possibility to change anything, since when you change something in previous block, you have to change the signature and the hash value of this block, and you will affect all the related blocks to this, of course, chain. So thank you very much for your attention, and of course not forget that together we can reach more, and we are strong, and we can reach the summer when we work together. And here, summer partners. Thank you.
Many thanks. Many thanks, Wissam, for this excellent talk. Any questions to interact with Wissam? Yeah, I have a question, by the way.
Yes, please.
In your talk, you addressed some other, you explored some other perspectives, which are, for example, blockchain, AI, quantum computing. Do you think there is any complementarity between these concepts and mutual recognition in practice?
See, if we want to improve, of course, so when we are thinking about strategy, we have to think about compliance, we have to think about resilience, complete as an aspect, as a strategy, and these technologies can improve and make our system, our platform, which we can develop for making the mutual recognition between the partners participating in this platform to make the things better working, and to know that when we have to trust someone, we know exactly that this person is the one we can trust and we are working with. That's why it's only an improvement, and we have the potential to improve everything using these technologies.
Yeah. I think the issue is intriguing somehow, because I saw that several European countries, 3 or 4, Czech Republic and some other countries, did point out explicitly in their national cybersecurity strategies that they have to find out several innovative solutions because of the power of quantum computing that will ruin everything in the trust model that we are relying on, including the cryptographic building blocks especially. So I think these are very important issues to point out to address.
Yes, yes. The most important thing is also to know that so working in the future will be different than what we are doing now.
Absolutely.
And that's why we have to take these aspects for next, not only today, but thinking about the future and take these aspects into consideration.
Absolutely correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, I will ask Mrs. Khadija to share with us her thoughts about these tricky questions about mutual recognition.
So, thank you all. Hello, everyone. Asaman Eskol. Bonjour tout le monde. So, my speech is going to be in English. I don't have a presentation, and I promise you all it's going to be quick, since I see that some are not very interested, maybe, in the lunch pause. So, hello, everyone. I'm Khadija Virginie. I'm CTO and co-founder of NGSign. And I'm going to, of course, talk about mutual recognition, the building blocks. So all the speakers before me, especially those from the public sector, have showed us what is being done in their countries. We've had Madame Olfa, of course, from Tunisia. We've had a speaker from Arabia Saudi, from Cameroon, etc. They all use the same technical words. We've heard ADAS, we've heard ETSI, WebTrust, cross-certification, etc. And yet, we still don't have the mutual recognition. So today, as a Tunisian citizen, if I use a qualified mean to sign electronically a document, this will be done, of course, within a few seconds, few minutes maybe, and it will be recognized in Tunisia. I can sign any document with another Tunisian citizen in Tunisia, let's say from Jerba, this will take a few minutes, the document will be signed and will be technically and legally recognized. But let's say I want this same document signed with another citizen from a different Arab or African country, a country that is using the same technical words, that is referring to WebTrust, referring to ETSI, this same document will not be accepted. So we all agree that basically the problem is from a legal point of view, and the problem is the identity. My identity, my electronic identity in Tunisia will not be the same in another country. So here I want to get back to the paper world. In the paper world, I have a national identity in Tunisia, but I have an international identity, which is my passport. My passport will be accepted in any country from the region, in any country from the Arab or the African world. And the final target is to have this in the electronic world. Actually, we've had Mr. Nick Pope earlier that showed us what was done in Europe. So in Europe, they have established a list of trusted services providers that is accepted within the countries that are part of the union. We can't. I think that you all agree we can't simply copy what is being done in Europe in our region. We have our specificities, we have our particularities. Let's say it's completely different geopolitics, etc. We can't copy it, but we can learn from it. We can take inspiration. So as again, Nick Pope said, they are working on ADAS 2.0. So they've had ADAS 1.0 from 2014, and it is right now at least mature enough. They have identified some errors, and the idea is to learn from those errors. So let's start by learning from their experience and learning also from their errors. So the idea is to gain some time learning from others' experiences and errors. Actually, I think that we need to start. sorry, yeah. We need to start actively working on the mutual recognition from two different points of view, but work on them at the same time. We can't simply go straight on the technical point of view because we can find some common ground, technically speaking, but if the legal framework is not, does not follow, we won't go anywhere. We, again, as the Arab and African region, we have our disparities from the technical and from the legal point of view, and the working groups need to address both the technical and the legal disparities at the same time in order to go towards the recognition. And also, I would like to point that we can talk about mutual recognition without talking about mutual assistance. So I think that both the TSP providers in the Arab and African worlds need to work together, but also the regulation bodies need to work together in order to find a common ground for the at least to go through for the the mutual recognition. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you. And last point. This will be addressed tomorrow in the workshop in more details for those who are interested. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's very important indeed to point out that it's very difficult in the Arab region to address such an issue because now we are living a digital divide within the Arab region. We have, for example, Al-Mamlaka and the Emirat who reached a high level of maturity, and other countries who are lagging behind. And it will be difficult to implement mutual recognition as it was done in Europe. So I think that we have to find an innovative even way to do it. And this is an open discussion, so if anyone has contributions and idea, we're more than open to listen and to take it into consideration. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we close this session, this very interesting session. We thank our speakers for their excellent talks and for sharing their thoughts and their experiences with us. And now I'm asking Muaz from NG Sign to join the panel and to take the moderation of the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to moderate second panel. So for this panel, it is more for discussion and not for presentation. It's about building digital trust and mutual recognition to promote the creation and of an open and shared digital economy. And I would like to call our panelist, Mr. Vija, again, please. Madame Olfa Tuntrust, Monsieur Eric José, Directeur du Centre National Cameroun, and Mr. Jibrila Ballo, Finance Administration Coordinator AICTO. Thank you. And Monsieur Thierry Yaousso, Assine Benin. So thank you very much. We will start. I think we don't have presentation for this panel. It's just some questions. And actually, we have seen in the morning panels that legal works for at least the country we have presenting. We talked about legal and technical frameworks, which, let's say, they have multiple similarities. The expected outcome of this panel is to hopefully to have to start with a short list of recommendations to achieve successful mutual recognition. And I would like to start with you, Mr. Viga, as representing the Asia Consortium, which is already with members, PKI members, which are already working on recognition. So could you please share with us how the coordination works and what are the benefits of this coordinations?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moez. Yeah. I think very interesting question that because we are talking about mutual recognition, the question is how this will help, right? So one of the conservative world example what I would like to take is we see product barcodes nowadays, right? So product barcodes, again, it's a oldest technology what we are using today, but it is a global standard but localized. So any country today follows this particular framework, and today it is recognized across the world. So today imports, exports, everything can recognize these identities, and that's how the technology has moved forward. And I think PKI is moving towards the same level of recognition over coming days, because it's a strong technology, universally recognizable, and it's technical. It's not limited by any proprietary structure. So that's why mutual recognition is very important. And what I mentioned is a recent example of e-passports, right? So why such a organization for a global immigration matter, they opt for PKI as a technology to get trust for any country opting for e-passport scheme, right? So that's how the technology has to mature, and that's how the mutual recognition has to benefit the larger industry. So it is mainly building the digital trust and bringing cross-border collaboration, the electronic information exchange, and making it easier.
Okay. And actually, just more question. So you were talking about EDAS as an example, so let's say successful example. Are you using actually the same? How are you using EDAS, or how is it related to EDAS actually?
So if you see Asian countries, I think we are still little alien to eIDAS. I mean, yes, I think Middle East is moving forward with a lot of HC related implementation, what our friends from Saudi Arabia also mentioned about that. What is happening is, it's again, where do you want to get mutually recognized, right? So Middle East has a lot of collaboration between Europe, and it helps a lot for implementing HC standards and getting mutually recognized. What I think HC is also working on globalized trust services. But if you see more East Asian countries or the South Asian countries, they are not much into electronic transaction recognition scheme yet. But I think the world is moving towards the same, where we can get a global benchmark and meet that particular recognition, so that countries can easily recognize each other. But having said that, I think today we follow Web Trust, which is not more detailed as HC, but yeah, it still gives very good level of global conformance that the country's PK infrastructure can be relied upon.
Thank you very much. Okay, next, here we have at least three countries, Tunisia, Cameroon, and Benin. And my next question is about actually the challenges and the recommendations. For question is challenge, actually, I mean, what are the main challenge for mutual recognitions? Would be legal, actually, the lack of unified legal framework, or more technically, lack of unified conformance checklist. We saw that they are similarity, but my question is it more legal or technical challenge to achieve mutual recognition? Starting from actually, when we talk about mutual recognition, there is the role of private sector, but I think should start with public sector, with public PKI, public agencies. So if we can start with Tunisia.
Mutual recognition, as say Khadija, it's difficult to implement because legal framework is not the same in all countries. Implementation of standards is not at the same level, and I think that you have to learn about the errors of other people because create the the circle again is not benefit, but learn about experience in European must be benefit for us. The idea to have a trust list for all government authority, can facilitate the mutual recognition between all the countries, and because this model it's already in plan, it's already implemented for the passport, so it's the most easy model to implement.
And actually, if you ask it, what will be the first step, or what will be your first recommendation towards the mutual recognition? What will be the first step?
I think that the first step must be that all the supervisor body in government have to talk together to find a common legal framework, common legislation to define the
shared legal framework.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Mais.
Thank you. So go to Cameroon. The challenges and what may be your recommendations?
Since my English is not yet certified, allow me to express myself in French.
Oui, on peut.
Okay, sorry. Alors, je souscris entièrement à ce qu'a dit le précédent intervenant, la précédente intervenante, en ce qui concerne la certification croisée. Alors, chez nous, ce que nous avons observé jusqu'ici, c'est que le besoin vient des clients finaux. C'est très souvent les clients finaux qui sollicitent, n'est-ce pas, cette reconnaissance des certificats. Alors, je veux partager avec vous la dernière expérience que nous avons eue en la matière. Alors, il y a une compagnie que tout le monde connaît ici, Air France, n'est-ce pas, qui avait l'habitude, je veux dire la représentation camerounaise d'Air France, avait l'habitude de signer ses contrats avec les partenaires par Adobe Sign, je crois, mais avec un certificat d'une autorité étrangère. Alors, avec tout ce que le Covid a apporté en termes de fermeture de frontières et des problèmes de contentieux, notamment. Alors, ils se sont rendus compte, n'est-ce pas, que les certificats qu'ils signaient au Cameroun n'avaient pas de valeur juridique parce que c'était des certificats qui étaient délivrés par une autorité de certification étrangère. D'accord? Donc, ils ont posé le problème. Il était question, n'est-ce pas, soit parce que le cadre légal ouvre cette possibilité, n'est-ce pas, donne la possibilité au ministre, n'est-ce pas, de signer un acte de reconnaissance afin que cette certification soit reconnue. Alors, il était question soit de recourir à cette option-là, ou alors de venir auprès de l'antique pour solliciter un certificat. Donc, pour le cas d'espèce, ils sont venus auprès de l'antique et ont sollicité un certificat afin d'être couverts. Et désormais, ils signent leurs documents avec le certificat généré par la PKI camerounaise.
D'accord. Et si je me permets ici une question, donc le document, il avait l'obligation de faire foi uniquement au Cameroun, ou aussi par rapport à Air France, par rapport en France?
Alors, le document avait, il était un document signé avec des partenaires camerounais.
D'accord, donc valeur
camerounais,
locale.
Donc, justement, donc il fallait une valeur juridique locale.
D'accord.
Donc, avec un document signé avec une AC étrangère, ils auraient eu des problèmes au niveau de la reconnaissance juridique de cette signature-là. Donc, voilà un cas d'école que je pose comme ça. C'est pour dire que le problème, il est vraiment
il est concret, tout à fait.
Voilà, et une solution mériterait d'être trouvée à cela pour un cadre concerté, comme a proposé
D'accord.
Merci.
Et comme recommandation ou comme première étape, qu'est-ce que vous proposez réellement par rapport au Cameroun? Quelle pourrait être la première étape pour arriver à cette reconnaissance, pour faciliter ce processus de reconnaissance?
Le cadre, il existe déjà, comme je l'ai dit. Les dispositions sont connues. C'est-à-dire que si une autorité étrangère sollicite que ces certificats soient reconnus sur le territoire national, elle émet juste la demande et l'antique diligente le dossier. Au niveau technique, il n'y a pas de problème. C'est juste, il n'y a pas de problème parce que c'est les mêmes normes qu'on utilise. Je crois que c'est X509 version 3, je crois. C'est la même norme qu'on utilise au niveau technique. Non, au niveau technique, il n'y a pas de problème. C'est juste au niveau réglementaire. Maintenant, il faudrait que cet acte-là soit signé. Et ensuite, lorsque vous avez un document qui fait l'objet d'un contentieux, on regarde juste le certificat. Si le certificat est reconnu, il n'y a pas de problème.
D'accord. En fait, ce qui est intéressant là de votre réponse et votre exemple, c'est que vous dites effectivement c'est déjà le cas. D'ailleurs, dans la plupart des réglementations, il y a effectivement un article qui dit que la reconnaissance mutuelle peut être implémentée par un simple décret ou un échange, en tout cas, entre deux agences, entre deux gouvernements. Ça, c'est, disons, la première étape de la reconnaissance. Mais si on veut finalement l'automatiser dans le sens où il ne faut pas demander l'accréditation dans chaque pays, parce que sinon là, ce n'est pas de la reconnaissance, ça veut dire qu'on va faire le travail de certification, disons, de la reconnaissance dans tous les pays, mais comment faire en sorte que ça soit automatique? Si je suis, moi, déjà certifié et accrédité, par exemple, en Tunisie, je suis automatiquement accrédité et certifié au Cameroun. Donc c'est ça l'objectif en fait de la reconnaissance, au-delà de faire la certification locale dans chaque pays.
Ce serait également très intéressant de passer par le cadre du réseau.
C'est ça.
Je pense que c'est un peu vers ce vers quoi nous tendons, de passer par le cadre du réseau, afin que, étant donné que nous sommes tous membres du réseau, que les certificats de toutes les autorités de certification au sein du réseau soient reconnus par les pays.
C'est l'objectif.
Voilà, justement. Donc, je pense qu'on pourrait également envisager cela et puis essayer de voir dans quelle mesure, au niveau de notre cadre, demander à notre ministre de prendre des dispositions dans ce sens-là.
D'accord. Merci.
Je vous en prie.
Donc, je passe à M. Thierry, le Bénin. Donc, s'il peut partager avec nous, pareil, les challenges et également une recommandation pour arriver à la reconnaissance mutuelle.
Ok, moi je crois que je vais vous étonner parce que pour moi, le challenge n'est ni légal en fait, ni technique. Pour moi, le challenge en fait, c'est plutôt de pouvoir identifier les enjeux. Les enjeux simplement parce que, alors, je vais peut-être en fait dire à l'envers, c'est-à-dire que pourquoi je ferai de la reconnaissance mutuelle? Pourquoi je chercherai à cross-certifier, d'accord, des infrastructures PKI? Je crois que la question, elle n'est ni légale ni technique. Il faut déjà que les pays soient capables de pouvoir identifier les enjeux communs. Est-ce qu'aujourd'hui, les transactions entre les pays justifient, d'accord, qu'il y ait de la reconnaissance mutuelle, que ce soit dans le commerce électronique, que ce soit sur le domaine social? Est-ce que lorsque des citoyens de mon pays vont dans un autre pays, à quoi ils doivent avoir accès ou quels sont les accords sur lesquels en fait justement nous sommes d'accord pour pouvoir faire bénéficier nos différents citoyens? Je crois que c'est, de mon point de vue, c'est le premier point. C'est le premier point et effectivement là-dessus je pense en fait que la diplomatie a un grand rôle à jouer, notamment pour négocier, n'est-ce pas, les différents domaines dans lesquels il faut mettre de l'effort. Après, bien évidemment, viendra en fait la partie juridique, mais je pense en fait que cette partie juridique, elle est vraiment pas compliquée. On l'a vu avec un exemple de l'Union européenne lorsqu'il y a eu le Covid, quand l'Union européenne a voulu mettre en place en fait un broker pour mettre en place justement en fait ce cas de reconnaissance des différents certificats des passes sanitaires. Ben, ça s'est fait en moins d'1 mois. Le cas légal plus en fait la partie technique. Mais ce qui a vraiment boosté, ça a été en fait de se rendre compte que, eh bien, l'incapacité de voyager, l'incapacité de prouver son statut sanitaire a amené en fait justement les réflexions sur ce sujet-là. Et donc, je crois qu'il y a des groupes de travail qui sont déjà en place. Je pense qu'en fait, que ces groupes de travail peuvent servir en fait, donc, de cadre, de réflexion, pour arriver à identifier en fait, les enjeux par domaine. Voilà.
D'accord. Et ici, en fait, j'ai des questions spécifiques un peu au Bénin. Comme vous l'avez présenté tout à l'heure, c'est peut-être la PKI la plus jeune, disons, en tout cas par rapport un peu les autres présentations. Moi, je connais très bien l'écosystème, donc c'est pour ça que je pose en fait, la question. Est-ce que pendant en fait, surtout dans la phase, vous avez parlé tout à l'heure d'une phase d'étude que vous avez lancée pour tout ce qui est finalement modèle économique, tout ce qui est opération de la PKI. Est-ce que dans cette phase-là, vous avez eu, comme le Cameroun tout à l'heure, des cas concrets où il y avait le besoin de cross-certifier ou le besoin de signer un document en local avec des autorités étrangères?
Alors, il y a eu quelques cas identifiés. D'abord, je parlais tout à l'heure en fait dans l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Déjà, il y a un cadre qui existe dans l'Afrique de l'Ouest qui...
C'était ma deuxième question.
Exactement. Qui donc promeut la libre circulation des biens et des personnes. Et donc, dans ce cadre-là, quand on le décline, vous avez un citoyen de l'Afrique de l'Ouest qui voyage donc en fait de son pays vers un autre. Il doit pouvoir traverser la frontière facilement, y compris présenter un certain nombre de documents, d'accord, pour potentiellement traverser en fait la frontière. Donc, ce cadre, en fait, justement, décline potentiellement les identités et les spécifications liées à ces identités-là pour permettre justement une reconnaissance. Quand je passe du Bénin au Togo, du Togo au Ghana, quand je présente ma carte d'identité, elle doit pouvoir être vérifiée facilement, aussi bien électronique que de façon dans le monde réel. Alors, un autre cas, bien évidemment, c'est le cas en fait, le mieux connu, hein, c'est celui en fait, du passeport, où avec l'OACI qui a mis en place en fait, depuis plusieurs années déjà un cadre donc, de reconnaissance multilatérale. Aujourd'hui, le Bénin en fait, a vraiment mis aux normes en fait, donc, ses passeports pour arriver à faire valider justement que ce soit l'identité, que ce soit l'empreinte, etc., pour la faire valider dans d'autres pays. Le sujet de l'empreinte est un peu plus complexe puisque aujourd'hui, il n'y a pas encore un référentiel central. Et donc, effectivement, pour faire de la reconnaissance mutuelle, on est en train de réfléchir aujourd'hui à effectuer la reconnaissance mutuelle avec certains pays. Notamment, on sait que le Rwanda est un pays en fait, frère avec lequel nous avons de plus en plus beaucoup de transactions, avec lequel nous pouvons potentiellement échanger ce type de données-là. Alors, après, maintenant, sur la partie signature électronique, on n'est pas encore très, très mature. Voilà. On n'est pas encore très, très mature en fait, là-dessus. Effectivement, le premier use case sur lequel nous sommes allés, ça a été en fait le pass sanitaire, puisqu'il y avait effectivement des enjeux qu'il fallait en fait régler. On avait identifié que les Béninois vont beaucoup en France, en Arabie Saoudite, quand il s'agit dans des pays hors Afrique. Donc, il fallait effectivement arriver à rentrer dans ce cadre-là pour faciliter donc en fait la vie aux Béninois qui voyagent. Après, effectivement, en Afrique, alors dans une moindre mesure, il y avait eu des réflexions sur un cadre d'interopérabilité au niveau africain, mais qui n'a pas prospéré. Donc, finalement, cela n'a pas été fait.
D'accord. Merci Thierry. Je reviens en fait sur effectivement une question. Vous avez commencé par une question très intéressante, qui était l'intérêt de faire cette reconnaissance. Why we implement the mutual recognition? I switch to English because I will ask the question is for Vijay, so I will switching to English. So the question is actually what are the interests of mutual recognition? Why we work? Why we do that? As PKI consortium, could you share the impacts, economic impacts of the collaboration between the members of Asia consortium when working for the mutual recognition?
Sorry, can you come again? It's on the
question is, Thierry, actually, when he started why we work for mutual recognition, what is the interest, and I think it is what is the financial or economic interest to do that. So my question is, do you have some experience to share from PKI, Asia PKI consortium about this point, about the interest, why we do the mutual recognition?
Yeah. So definitely, that's a very good question, because mutual recognition, now today what is happening, many countries are looking at Europe as a very successful model of mutual recognition, like name it 28, 29 countries, very successful mutual recognition happening in this EU region, right? So, but what it requires is a technical infrastructure operation even at a central level. that's a major challenge when other regions are looking into operating such an infrastructure, right? So because in Europe they operate something called European Trust List, which is a 24/7 guaranteed trust list accessible to all the acceptable parties. But what is happening when we talk about the region? So assume we talk about North African region or the AICTO region, the question will come like, who will operate this particular infrastructure and how this can be relied upon, right? So these are the general challenges what are coming when we are trying to see adoption of HC as a service for mutual recognition. But what we are seeing as successful use cases where people have moved is more on a bilateral agreement. But before this bilateral agreement, two important barometers what is looked is, one is the legislation, which I think we have spoken much deeper, but second is more of an interoperability. When we talk about interoperability, again, whether it's like it's a benchmark like either WebTrust or a HC compliant infrastructure operated by that country. So when that is there, if these two are successful, then I think the bilateral framework can come in, and that can be more a regional acceptance rather than looking at sophisticated setup of operating a centralized infrastructure, publishing the trust list, and bringing up the supervisory bodies. I think that's too much challenging for countries to start with. I think the simple thing should be the better thing to start with.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll leave space for a question if there's any questions or anything to add.
Thank you. Thank you all for the panelists for the great talks. I think I want just to focus more on the first steps that we can do in order to make the mutual recognition process begins. I think there is a way or a method that we can have some extent of the universal law. We can take the minimal version of something like IDAS or something else, and then we can have the minimum. This is the minimum for each country in order to have the mutual recognition between them, and then based on each country regulations, and you can localize more. So I think these more localization can be done based on the country needs. So I think that's also something similar to what the panelists said. Something from the logistics. They have also something that is universal. You can import or export goods, and then you can put more let's say digits or some type of localization for each country based on their needs.
Thank you. More question? So I would like to thank our panelists. Thank you again. Merci, Jean. Merci.
شكرا لكل المتدخلين. مع هذه الجلسة نكون كملنا برنامج اليوم. نحب نفكركم اليوم غد فما دورتين تدريبيتين على الساعة الأولى تنطلق على الساعة 8:30 بالضبط على الاي بي سيك، والساعة 10 في دورة تدريبية ثانية على الاي اي داس، حتكون في نفس القاعة في ثلث القاعة الأخير بالطبع لأنه القاعة كبيرة. الدورة التدريبية إذا كان في اهتمام بالطبع، احنا اوريدي عنا قائمة، إذا كان فما اهتمامات أخرى من المشاركين ممكن تتصلوا بنا واحنا نضيفكم في قائمة المشاركين في هذه الدورة التدريبية. سي محمد تحب تتكلم؟ ونستدعيكم بالطبع هنا فيه استراحة الفطور نفس المطعم، مطعم أزور. تفضل سي محمد.
إذن بذلك ننهي برنامج يومين ثريين من المداخلات ومن المواضيع التي تم التطرق عليها وهي مواضيع أولا الأمن السيبراني، وثانيا موضوع الثقة الرقمية. لقد أبرزت التدخلات أهمية الثقة الرقمية، وأصبحنا نتحدث عن السمعة الرقمية، ومن هنا يبرز أهمية أن تكون يعني الأقاليم أو المناطق فيها ما يسمى بالاعتراف المتبادل. هذا هام وهام جدا. عملية الاعتراف مع كل بلدان العالم هذه عملية شبه مستحيلة، ولكن عند التكتل على مستوى أقاليم هذا بيسهل أنه عمليات الاعتراف المتبادل تتم بين الأقاليم، ولذلك عملنا من أجل إحداث هذه الشبكة الإقليمية العربية الإفريقية. خلقنا هذا الإناء موجود بكل مقوماته، والمنظمة العربية بصفتها السكرتارية جاهزة لأن تقوم بتنسيق كل العمليات، سواء كان من الجانب التشريعي الجانب الفني، حتى نصل إلى مسألة الاتفاق المتبادل، وهي الغاية التي نعمل عليها والتي كنت أكدت عليها في كلمة الافتتاح. أشكر كل المتدخلين على ما قدموه اليوم، سواء كانوا ممثلين لبلدان، واستمعنا إلى العديد من المداخلات البلدان التي كانت يعني مهمة وهامة جدا. وهنأ يعني الأخوة في المملكة العربية السعودية بإجماع الجميع أنه وصلوا إلى مرتبة متقدمة جدا، يعني مثل الأمن السيبراني يوم أمس، وبقية البلدان الذين قدموا الذين هم أيضا في مراتب يعني لا بأس بها. وأظن أن لدينا اليوم نواة للعمل المشترك على المستوى الإقليمي العربي الإفريقي، حتى نبدأ في التجهيز لعملية الاعتراف المتبادل، خاصة وأن رأينا في الإقليم الأوروبي مسألة الاعتراف المتبادل هامة وهامة جدا. لقد تعرضنا خلال جائحة كورونا إلى مسألة الاعتراف بشهادات التلقيح، ورأينا أن كانت هنالك عملية صعبة وصعبة جدا، أنه في كل بلد لها الشهادة الوطنية لها، ولكن على مسألة الاعتراف طالما ليست هنالك هذه الاتفاقيات المتبادلة تكون العملية صعبة وصعبة جدا. أشكر كل الذين ساهموا في مداخلات هذا اليوم، وسوف أدعو. أولا كان لي طلب خاص من الطاولة التي كنت أجلس عليها حتى نأخذ صورة مع بعض في مرحلة أولى، وفي بعض المرحلة الثانية سوف أطلب من الكل المتحدثين إلى الطلوع إلى المنصة لأخذ صورة، وفي مرحلة ثالثة كل المشاركين لأخذ صورة جماعية. أول شيء الطاولة التي كنت جالس عليها.